Well, we were bound to get a bit of a stinker at some point in terms of UFC action. We'd had a number of really, really good cards in a row, absolute crowd pleasers both on pay per view and on Fight Pass. And this card, UFC London, UFC Blaydes versus Aspinall, it had its high points, but it started quite slow at a grinding pace. It finished with an uninspiring co-main event and a main event that ended on an injury. So I would be hard pressed to say that it was a good card, but sometimes that happens. On paper, this card should have been actually a fair bit better. I don't usually give credit to the UFC when their cards over deliver. I also am not going to really hate on them for the cards under delivering. Let's start with the main event: Curtis Blaydes versus Tom Aspinall. Not a lot to say here. 15 seconds. Blaydes and Aspinall are exchanging strikes. Both of them are landing some good stuff. Aspinall throws a leg kick, connects with the meat of the leg of Curtis Blaydes. Blaydes is throwing a 1-2 combination back at him. Aspinall steps back, and his knee buckles. I don't know. I still haven't seen a news article on like ACL, MCL, PCL, what kind of injury we're specifically talking about here. But it did look exceedingly painful, obviously. It's a bit of a freak accident, and it does make two main events in a row that are ended by injury. This one, probably even less informative than the Yair Rodriguez, Brian Ortega one, because at least in that one, Ortega injured his shoulder trying to defend an armbar. Here, it's just Aspinall stepping back. And it's a shame because obviously I was very excited for this fight. It was a great chance to see what Aspinall could do because Aspinall's been given a series of tests of varying degrees of difficulty, and he has passed them all with flying colors. And this was kind of the last one before, like, if you beat Curtis Blaydes, you're a legit elite heavyweight, title contender, someone who very well may put that big belt around their waist. And we were cheated out of that, basically, by a freak injury. Unfortunate. As for the what is next, I mean, presumably Blaydes will get the winner of Tai Tuivasa and Cyril Gane. Most likely in a intern title fight because I still have no faith that the John Jones Stipe Miocic fight is going to happen. And of course, we have injuries for Francis Ngannou, of course. So the UFC will probably do an interim fight, and it'll probably be Cyril Gane versus Curtis Blaydes to give away my thoughts on Gane's next fight. Next up on the card, probably the most frustrating fight for me because, of course, I picked Chris Curtis to win this fight. I thought that Curtis's pressure footwork, good range striking, and quality jab would get the job done. And boy, could I have not been more wrong. Because Jack Hermansson put out his best performance probably in a long, long, long time in terms of striking. He showed off questionably he showed off either like really good footwork or really exposed Chris Curtis. Take your pick, kind of. I'm just kind of curious. So they gave Curtis the third round of this fight. Two judges did. I'm not sure if I'm still happy with that one. Let's pull up the stats here, get a look at that. Again, the box score, so to speak, does not always tell the story, but it does give us some numbers to reference. Yeah, no, he got outlanded 34-20. Didn't hurt Hermansson in the round. It was his best round, but by no means did he win it. He got hurt in the second round. Otherwise, it was pretty simple. Hermansson would stay at range, would circle away, would use footwork, used cagecraft, and did hurt him somewhat in the second round with a punch and then some interesting like tomahawk style elbows as he was trying to get the finish. After the fight, Curtis flipped him off, and Hermanson responded by saying, "Go fuck yourself." And we ended up with Hermanson apologizing for the language, the performance. It wasn't required. Like, this was Curtis not delivering. I understand this was a short notice fight, but Curtis trains with Sean Strickland, a guy who really kind of wrote the book on how to beat Jack Hermanson. And Curtis had all of the traditional problems for Hermanson. Southpaw. Good jab. And it was just sad. It was just not a good fight, and really not a good performance from Curtis in any way, shape, or form. And just as I guess testament, when fighters resort to taunting their opponents and turning away and walking back to the center of the cage and demanding that they come face them like a man, they've lost the fight. That's all there is to that. And for Hermanson, I don't really want to see it, but they'll probably try and book that Darren Till fight again. They've tried it twice. It's failed twice, and I don't know why they would want to go for it again, but they inevitably probably will. And for Chris Curtis, I don't know. This was a chance to really do something, and now I find myself kind of not really all that interested. Maybe a fight with another guy who I've lost any real hope for and interest in Uriah Hall. Could be fun. That's about it. Moving further down, we have Paddy Pimblett versus Jordan Leavitt. Now, this was actually a good fight. I want to say that. Essentially, Leavitt came out, immediately went for the takedown, as you would expect. Got him up for a pretty big slam, but Paddy put him in the guillotine, got back up, jumped the gilly again, and then had some standing back and left Leavitt with some standing back control. I was pretty happy that Paddy got this round on two judges' scorecards because he deserved it. There was very, very little to it for Leavitt. Just some positional work, some grinding. He even got head kicked and, got caught in like 3 separate guillotines. So, I don't know. Paul Felder thought that Leavitt won the round, and I was really worried that he would get it on some judges' scorecards, and I think one still gave it to him, but otherwise the other judges were sane to recognize that there was essentially no damage landed by Leavitt. And he was in trouble when they went to the ground. Pimblett was not. And on the feet, Pimblett was not in any real danger either. And the sad thing about Leavitt striking is he was in danger with Paddy Pimblett on the feet. It's not great. Second round comes. Paddy lands a good hard knee, gets the back, rear naked choke, and the teabag is done. I did actually like the post fight from Pimblett for a change. Sometimes he says some, not offensive or anything, but like just some ridiculous stuff that I don't really enjoy. I don't enjoy hyperbolic post fight speeches. I never have. And this was much better in that regard. He talked about mental health. A friend of his, of course, had recently committed suicide. Talked about the stigma of like men not talking about their feelings needs to end. Couldn't agree more with that, honestly. It was a good message from a guy who you wouldn't kind of really expect it from. Like he's a dual personality in that regard, because he just got done teabagging another man. Tugged on the emotional heartstrings, did his thing. I will say that I've never really had much of a problem with Paddy himself. Now, I don't like him towing the company line as far as fighter pay is concerned, and fighter benefits. I don't like it when anyone does that, to be honest, because it's bullshit. But otherwise, seems like you'd be a fun guy to hang around with. He doesn't even seem to really like talk about like title shots or being the next big thing. Honestly, he talks about entertaining. He talks about being the guy you come see for that entertainment level, and I don't deny it. I don't deny that, which is good. But his fans are insufferable. Um, Kind of like Sean O'Malley fans, kind of like Ian Gary fans is another example of this. But without like the encouragement from the fighter themselves. Like there are people talking about him getting ranked in the top 5 off of this. No, Jordan Leavitt is a fundamentally one-dimensional fighter with a dimension that Patty happens to be pretty good at avoiding. Realistically, like this was a stylistically great matchup. I don't have a problem with the way the UFC is matchmaking him, as long as they keep treating him as just like this fun action attraction fighter. I have no issue with it, but this is a case of call a spade a spade. This is a guy who has fought 2 guys like Luigi Vendramini and then like arguably not even a step up in Kazula Vargas, and now Jordan Leavitt. Now, Jordan Leavitt on paper is a step up because he's a 3-1 fighter, blah blah blah. But Jordan Leavitt's best win is I don't even know. Like, I don't even know. Like, is it Matt Wyman? Is it Trey Ogden? Is it Matt Sales? I don't know. Like, they're all pretty bad by UFC standards. And Pimblett is still a mess. He's incredibly hittable. He's not necessarily a fundamentally great grappler or a fundamentally great wrestler. He is tough. He is explosive, and he does carry good power in his hands. Like, there's some nice things to be said about him, but like at lightweight, this man has no business anywhere near the top 15. Like, straight up. I don't think he ever will. Because I don't think he has a ton of like I don't think he has enough time. Some people were floating about the idea of him fighting Matt Frivola, and I'm pretty down for that actually, the more I think about it. Like, Frivola is it's a stiffer test than Leavitt. It's a guy who has a more well-rounded game, kind of exists in like all aspects of it, and is a little bit more physical. Like, it would be interesting, but and at the same time, it's still a winnable fight for Paddy Pimblett. Like, I'm the UFC is not going to give him a fight where he's not got any pathway to victory, and hoping otherwise, I think, is just a waste of time. So why not do that? And for Leavitt, I've got the winner of Benoit Saint Denis versus Christos Giagos. I don't really have high hopes for Leavitt. Like, I like Leavitt. This is a case of he's a fighter that I do like. I just think that there are some significant hard caps to his physicality, and the fact that he doesn't seem to pick up much in the way of striking technique from fight to fight to fight really just has me worried that he's not going to be in this for the long haul. Alexander Gustafsson got knocked out by Nikita Krylov. I have nothing further to say. Krylov went out there and he kind of looked like the old aggressive, super fight finish happy Krylov. He got the finish, and Gustafsson probably should retire. And I say this knowing that he's retired once and talked about retiring again, and it's kind of oscillated between talking about heavyweight and 205. Like, there is nothing positive to take from Alexander Gustafsson's recent performances. There's just nothing. I'm not really interested in seeing it. It's hard to think of who he could fight at 205 and safely beat, because I also think he's starting to become undurable, and he's been getting injured a lot. I think it's time. For Krylov, he called out Volkan Oezdemir. I'm perfectly fine with that fight. 2 bangers. 2 guys who are kind of like not contenders, but a step below that, like kind of that gatekeeper to the contender status. Guys who have lost to most of the actual contenders as well. I'm perfectly fine with that. That sounds like a good fight. Sounds like a fun fight. Why not do it? Meatball Molly McCann beat Hannah Goldie. there was some early success for Hannah Goalie. She came out of the gate hot, and Meatball took a little bit of time finding some timing, finding the openings, but she got there. She started picking off Goldie's entries with her boxing, and then eventually started working some clinch. Not a lot happened in the clinch, and then we ended up back at range. Uh, Goldie had a kind of a knockdown where Molly did go butt to the mat, and there was a leg lock attempt, and then all hell broke loose because Molly hits the spinning back elbow, a huge flurry, gets the stoppage. Everything I said about Patty Pimblett applies to Molly McCann. Like, she's an entertaining personality, she's an entertaining action fighter, but we've also, I think, seen where her ceiling is, even more so than Patty, because Molly has been demonstrated on. Essentially, losing to Laura Procopio / Laura Fritzen and Tyler Santos. Like, those are good fighters, but at the same time, like, it's not like Fritzen's a massively good fighter. Like, she's a middle of the road fighter, and like, people were talking about getting her a ranked opponent as well. And about the only one I could see them doing is like if they wanted to do her versus Cynthia Calvillo, who's still somehow in the top 15 of flyweight. Like, Calvillo is I was talking to someone on Twitter. They were convinced that Calvillo would just out wrestle her, and I'm just like, Calvillo of old maybe, but Calvillo is taking this whole like Paige Van Zant journey into like becoming a action, like, creative, artistic striker, and it has not worked at all. Didn't work for Paige, is not working for her, and that's all I can say on that one. For Hannah Goldie, I don't really know what to say. Like, she's been in the game for a relatively short time, but at the same time, like, she's in her 30s. So, like, is she going to develop the skill set that she needs to actually become something? Because she has the physicality. She is built in a big way. For Meatball, I don't know why it hasn't been brought up before. Montana De La Rosa. What does everyone think of that? Like, is that an interesting fight for Molly McCann? Because it's a step up on a technical level from Hannah Goldie, while being a down step in physicality. It's probably winnable, but like, might actually go a little bit longer and look like a decent win on Molly's record. They want to go that way. And for Goldie, all I really got is Mandy Boom. Like, the problem is that like she's beaten Emily Whitmire, which is like pretty much the bottom of flyweight, and now she's lost to Molly McCann. Like, I don't know what you do with her. Like, she's gonna stick around. This is one fight in a row, and she's an attractive lady. They like that. She's got some promise, but like, there's not a wealth of depth at the lower end of flyweight. And if Boom is going to stay around, you might as well go with that option. Before that, we had a 205 fight between not Daniel Craig, Paul Craig, the Bear Jew, and Volkan Oezdemir. Interesting fight. Paul Craig pulling guard, willing to go to his back a lot. And I think that essentially lost him the fight because he didn't even get a round, which I don't overly agree with. I feel like Paul Craig should have won the first round. He had a couple of close submission attempts, working the leg, working from the triangle position as well. And I even scored the second round for him. I think on rewatch, I'd probably score the second round to Oezdemir. I just thought that Craig, again, had some effective grappling and did have like the biggest strikes of the fight because he landed some like pretty stiff counter punches and a couple of high kicks on Volkan Oezdemir. But at the same time, he also pulled mount in the second round, and a lot of his guard pulls by the second round were starting to become like just flops, which should not be scored for anything. It's interesting, how do you score how do you score guard pulls? Because you're putting yourself in an inherently disadvantaged position, but at the same time, you are controlling the fight. You are kind of dictating where it's happening. It's definitely a lower form of a takedown, essentially, because a takedown at least puts you in a good position, and a guard pull does not, unless you can get the submission. In which case, there's nothing really to score. You won the fight. But yeah, after the first round, Craig didn't really have anything. Uzdemir actually did the the smart thing and just didn't willingly grapple with Paul Craig. And the commentary team on this fight kind of annoyed me because they were like it's tough to solve the mystery of Paul Craig and the enigma that is Paul Craig, and it's like it really isn't. It's just don't grapple with him. He is a get in my guard guy who doesn't really have a takedown game. Like there is some stand up to him, don't get me wrong, but like realistically, just don't grapple with him. And it's something that Nikita Krylov refused to do. It's something Jamal Hill refused to do. It's something Magomed Ankalaev refused to do, although in Ankalaev's defense, actually probably made sense for him to do that. At the time, he still is, and at the time was a monster top grappler. And yeah, interesting Twitter note here. Ben Askren was shitting on Paul Craig, talking about how like not necessarily shitting on Paul Craig, but like asking like, how does Paul Craig not know how to finish a double leg? How has this not happened? And it's just kind of amusing coming from Ben Askren because Askren is the guy that when he was coming up in Bellator was talking about how he would never be a good striker. About how he wasn't even focusing on it because he was starting the striking game too late in life. And like Paul Craig is the same with wrestling. Like he didn't wrestle in high school. He didn't wrestle in college. He doesn't have that deeply ingrained, muscle memory of wrestling. And that's why it's kind of like when Daniel Cormier starts talking about wrestling, where it's like, okay, but you guys realize you've been wrestling since you were like old enough to walk. Like there's a reason you find this exceptionally easy. And it's just kind of weird that Askren, a guy who has admitted that picking up stuff later on in life is hard, would be the guy leading sort of the criticism of Paul Craig's game. It's a bit weird. Like, don't get me wrong. Like, it'd be nice if Paul Craig would learn some more reliable takedowns and improve his striking game. But like at the same time, he's in his mid-30s. It's not really going to happen. And for next opponents, like I said, Volkan versus Krylov. And Paul Craig versus Ryan Spawn, maybe. Feels like kind of failing up, but I don't know. I find that fight kind of interesting. They're two super tall dudes who do have good submission games, but are actually probably incredibly submittable in their own rights. And I wouldn't mind seeing the fight. We go to the undercard for the shock of the night for me, anyways. Ludwig Klein, who I had kind of written off. Really, he was coming off a win and everything, but the win felt like more of a referendum on Devontae Smith than it did on Ludwig Klein being a good player, or not a good player, a good fighter. And maybe I have to reevaluate that because he did some good work. Now, I did score the first round for Mason Jones. I saw a lot of people scoring it for Klein. The box scores, so to speak, also suggest that it was Klein's, but I don't know. Live, I thought that Jones was getting more work done in the clinch. A lot of what Klein was doing outside of the amazing, like, movie-style jumping scissors kick he hit in the first round wasn't all that great. But the numbers say differently and people disagree. Maybe I need to go back and watch that one. And then in the second round, Clyde drops him. And Jones was able to survive, get back up, get the fight against the cage, working some knees. I actually finished the round really, really well because he really got it going. But Klein definitely won the round, and then Jones kind of threw the fight away when he went for that jumping armbar in the third round. Talking about guard pulls, wasn't any close to getting a submission, and it took him to like a minute left to get back up on the feet, and then he just ended up clinching, and there was no way to go but like Klein winning. It was a really down performance from Mason Jones, a guy who I expected to do good things in this fight. That I thought that a lot of what Nate Landwehr did to beat Ludwig Klein was in his game, his bag of tricks. That he could be a pressure fighter, and that he could kind of overwhelm Klein with activity and power, because Klein is a guy who never feels terribly comfortable in a dogfight. And he just couldn't really, one, he couldn't really force that kind of fight on him, and two, I'm not sure he was really going for it. Because a lot of the time, he was just kind of hanging around at Klein's range. And it let Klein get a lot done. I don't know. I've got Klein fighting the winner of Rafa Garcia and Drakkar Klose, and I've got Mason Jones fighting Uros Medic. Medic is kind of a similar opponent to Klein. Long, lanky guy who might ask some questions of a similar nature. A little bit of a faster pace, a little bit more aggressive, a little bit more of a brawler. It'd be a fun fight, and I don't know, give Jones sort of kind of a do-over. This felt like a fight he should have won. Mark Jacasey grapple fucked Damir Hadzovic and picked up a 30-27 decision. The commentary team was way less ridiculous than they were in the past with Jacasey, because with Jacasey, they've historically been like stunned that he's wrestling, and at least they're still making it out like this is a evolvement on his game as opposed to the game he came into the UFC with. But I guess it's a step in the right direction. They were also talking about a 10-8. I think it was the first round they were talking about giving it a 10-8. No. Just no. Excuse me. Ugh. Big yawn. My apologies. Not much else to say about the fight. I mean, Hadzovic, we knew this could happen to him. He's low output power striker who doesn't have a lot of get up off his back, and Jacasey is content to just kind of grind it out and be kind of the British John Fitch right now. Which is a little bit ashamed because he could be more than that. He's got a lot of athletic ability. I don't mean give up on the wrestling, to be clear. I find him going for takedowns perfectly serviceable. It's just, I'd like to see the next stage. I'd like to see a more open ground and pound game, or going for some submissions, getting back mount, whatever. Just something. And for Hadzovic, put him up against Chris Grutzmacher. It'd be an interesting action fight. And for Jacasey, Alexander Hernandez kind of comes to mind as a guy who might have the right physicality and the right wrestling defense to kind of force Jacasey to show us something more. So let's go with that one. Then we had, or before that I should say, we had Nathaniel Wood in his featherweight debut against Charles Rosa. Charles Rosa is a super, super tough dude, but he had no answers for Wood. Wood had sharp counters all throughout this, punished the leg, and the most significant offense Charles Rosa landed was a nut shot. He was stumbling around there. The leg was collapsing. There was some potential 10-8s to be scored there. The judges gave, two judges gave a 10-8. I'm assuming the second round, am I right on that, was the 10-8? Yes. 10-8 from judges David Lethaby and Daryl Ransom. Clemens Warner again. Fucking hell. That guy's terrible. He's quickly making his way up my terrible judge list. unfortunately. He gave all 10 nines. For next opponents, I've got Nathaniel Wood against Tucker Lutz because I'd like to see him against somebody who has just a little bit more physicality. Like Lutz is not necessarily a better technical fighter than Rosa. Probably less varied in skill. But I think he's a little bit bigger, and I think he's a little bit more athletic. So like, let's see what happens there. And with Rosa, he's on 3 straight losses. If they don't cut him, I say give him to Shane Young, and that assumes Shane Young is still on contract. But I think that would be a fun fight that I would largely enjoy. JSP, Jonathan Pierce, survived early trouble with Makwan Amirkhani. And essentially it became the standard Makwan Amirkhani fight where he gets tired and then he gets finished. And it's a good performance for JSP. Proved he was actually hard to finish. But there was also a cage grab that I really wish something had actually been done instead of just don't grab the cage. Because it did stop Makwan's kind of last gasp of offense. Like, I don't think Makwan was on his way to a win. I think he was done. But if you grab the cage and it clearly helps you stay in top position and then it leads to the finishing sequence, you kind of have to ask the question of like, okay, what is the point of the rules? That's all. I would have liked to see it get stood up at least, or give Amirkhani the position. I don't know. I don't really know what I would have liked to see, but something. JSP needs to stop trying to be GSP after the fight. Please stop. Please. You're not that good. And next for him, I penciled in Joe Anderson Brito. You know, physical guy with bone crushing power, because we've just kind of seen JSP just outlast people and like take guys who are not super threatening from a physicality standpoint prior to Amirkhani anyways, and lose early exchanges and then take over. And Brito is a hard hitter with a pretty good ground game of his own. And for Makwan Amirkhani, there's only one thing that makes sense, and that's put him in there with Derek Binner. 2 guys who are going to go out there and absolutely try to choke each other, and then hopefully one of them does, because like after that it might get kind of terrible. But like, make it happen. Mohamed Mokaev set a record for takedowns in a flyweight fight. I don't have anything else to say. I still have the same reservations about him, that like he fights like a guy who's an A+ S tier athlete, and I don't think he is. So there you go. For Charles Johnson, good job surviving with a guy on your back, but was about it. There was no meaningful offense from him. And I don't have much else to say. Put him in there with Clydeson Rodriguez next, and Mokaev against Jeff Molina. It's kind of a boring fight. Then we had Jai Herbert versus Kyle Nelson. I'm still worried about Jai Herbert because it took him a long time to get going here, and it took Nelson gassing for him to really take over. And I still think that there's a element of fragility to him. I think that there's an element of... I think there's all kinds of problems with him, just honestly. He's a guy who relies entirely on his reach to protect himself, and like there are good pieces there. There's a good boxing game. It's quick, it's clean on the counter, it's got combinations, but at the same time, all it seems to take is getting inside his reach to kind of just short circuit him. And if Nelson was higher output and didn't gas and fade badly, we could very easily be talking about a win for him. And for next opponents, I put Michael Johnson against Herbert, and Slava Claus versus Kyle Nelson. I think that would actually be a banger. Mandy Boom versus Victoria Leonardo. I blanked on the first name there for a second. I still don't know what to make of Leonardo. Like, she showed in this fight that like when she's not facing a ridiculous physical opponent, she can still bully. She can be the busier fighter. She can. I'm gonna burp. She can just kind of force a clinch and smash things into the cage and do that, and that's fine. But I also think she has a physical ceiling, and we'll figure out what it is at some point. It's somewhere between Mandy Bohm and Aaron Blanchfield, I guess. I don't know. It wasn't great. It wasn't great, and Bohm some good counters, but she's a long-limbed fighter who forces a clinch a lot, and doesn't seem to really actually have a great range game. I appreciate that she's now with Eric Nixick and the Extreme Couture people, and that's solid coaching. Better than what she had before. But I also kind of wonder, like, is it the best place for her frame? And honestly, despite being 5'7", can she do 115? Because she looks just small. And for next opponent, I've got her, like I said, against Hannah Goldie. And for Leonardo, Luana Carolina is not booked. And she kind of fits my desire to see where Leonardo's physicality runs out. And Claudio Silva fought Nicholas Dalby in the opener. Silva started well. He got the takedown. He got some control time, got some ground and pound. And then in the second round, Silva got the takedown, but got reversed by Dalby and just got basically owned the rest of the way. I gave that round to Dalby. And then the third round was fairly meh, but Dalby won it pretty clearly. And it went like I thought it would. The problem with Claudio Silva is there's a distinct problem when you're no longer to keep up your own pace. Like, it's one thing if someone puts a heavy pace on you and you gas. It's another thing where when you get to set the pace, you land 11 significant strikes, 59 total strikes, and you gas yourself out. That's a problem. I think Silva is done. There's not really much left for him to really offer the UFC. And for Nicholas Dalby, I would love to see him fight Jack Della Maddalena. I'm not going to get that fight, but I think it would be really cool. I think Della Maddalena's pace against Dalby's pace, that's a really fun fight. It's like kind of really, really simple to Dalby's way back. I want to say his debut in the UFC against Darren Till as a fight that I think has a lot of promise, but I don't think that's what we're going to make because Della Maddalena is going to get something bigger. And that's about it. That was the fight card. Not great. Sorry for the short episode here today. I was planning on having a special guest. They were unable to make it. Check out the links down below. I put up my Linktree link. So hopefully that just takes care of everything. The Discord, the Twitter, the Twitch, the YouTube, the various podcast venues. And have a look. And I would love to see you guys in the Discord to chat about fighting there and getting deep into the business and the nitty gritty. So I will see you for UFC. What number is it now? 277, which has some really good fights on it. Obviously, the top of the card is pretty nice. But even further down, like, I'm looking forward to Moreno or Alex Morono versus Semelsberger. I think that's a fun fight. I think Alves versus Dober is a fun fight, as is Closa versus Garcia. I do think there are some bizarre people on the card, like Adam Fuggett and Hamdi Adel Wahab, but it's still fun. It's still good to go, I think. And Nick Degamariano was on that card, and Blood Diamond. Oh, geez. Okay, so there are some low lights, but there's enough good stuff there that I think it'll be a rebound card from this one. There you go. So have a good day. Thanks for stopping by.